This month, we are talking about how to ask. And I mean that really broadly, like how to ask anything. How to ask someone to sign a contract, how to ask someone to work with you, how to ask anything in writing. Because the first part of this is that most of us have not been exposed to messages that use questions. At work, most of the way that we write to each other is in statements. We say, I was wondering if you had that contract ready yet, period. Or we say, I was wondering if you're free on Tuesday, period. Or I was hoping that you and I could meet, period. Or I was checking up on whether the files for the client are ready, period. We see that kind of writing, and so we use that kind of writing in our messages at work. And the thing is that each of those examples was an ask. It was a question. And yet when we write it as a statement, especially an I-focused statement, we are not showing the reader that they are supposed to write us back. The easiest way to get somebody to act is to ask them to take that action. When we use a question mark, we draw the reader's eye to that part of our message, okay? As readers, most of us are not reading every single word. We aren't reading top to bottom, left to right, every single thing. What we're doing is we're scanning, looking for words and other symbols that capture our attention. And when we see a question mark, we know that that is probably something we should read because it's probably something we need to respond to. So the question mark itself in our message draws the reader's eye. They are more likely to look at that question. Now, that's a huge benefit in and of itself because if they see it, they're more likely to read it. Okay, then when they read the question is going to say something like, have you had a chance to finalize the files for the client? Question mark. When do you think you'll have your contract signed and sent back to me? Question mark. What would be a good day for us to meet? Question mark. When you ask those questions, they read them and they know, okay, so they see the question mark, they read the question, they know that they're supposed to write you back. And so the question itself moves the conversation forward, because too often when we're skimming, we see the I wonder, I hope, I was checking up on, I was thinking about, and all of those. Nothing's wrong with those sentences. They're not grammatically wrong. They're not rude. They just aren't useful because the reader isn't likely to read them. They start with I. That's about the writer, not about me, the reader. So they're not likely to read them. They're not likely to see them. They're not likely to recognize that there's an action in there that they need to respond to. What happens with a question is they see it, they read it, and they know what the request is, and they can write you back. And so asking with question words is a super effective way to move business forward. Now, you also have some control over what the questions are or how you ask. And that means a lot of our questions are yes or no answers. Like, would you be able to meet on Tuesday at 2:00? That is a question, but the other person can only say, yes, I'm available to meet on Tuesday at 2:00, or no, I'm not available to meet on Tuesday at 2:00. So there's only two possible answers to a would you, will you, can you, could you question. That works, but only if those are the possibilities that you want. Either you can meet with me on Tuesday at 2 or you can't. Nothing else will do. Okay? Sometimes that is the case. Sometimes you can ask an open-ended, when would be a good time for us to meet? Question mark. And you could even follow it with, here are some possible times that work for me, colon. And then you could list some times, and you could include Tuesday at 2 at the top of that list to make it more likely that they pick that time. But when you ask the open-ended question, you're allowing for more possibilities, right? When can you do that by? Or what do you need in order to meet the client's deadline on Friday? Right? It's an open-ended question. It presumes that we're going to meet the deadline, but it's saying, okay, how are we going to do this? What do we need to make sure that we get it done? When you ask the open-ended questions, you're generating more possibilities in the response and allowing for a broader conversation. So it is really important that we practice using question marks in our writing to direct the reader's attention, to direct their eye. On top of that, that we are asking specific targeted questions that will lead to further conversation and the results and outcomes that we want from our messages. And then that we're being careful about what kinds of questions we're asking so that we ask yes or no questions, right? Would you, will you, could you, can you kinds of questions when yes or no are the obvious possible answers. Like those are the acceptable answers to us. So we're using those questions when we want yes or no as the outcomes, but we're using open-ended questions. What, when, how, when we want to invite more possibilities. Keep in mind that those what, when, how questions often presume that some part of the work is going forward, right? How are we going to meet the client's Friday deadline? Assumes that we're meeting the client's Friday deadline. So it's not, are we going to meet the client's Friday deadline? Yes, we are, or no, we're not. No, it's how are we going to do it? So it's a question that invites further conversation and presumes that we're going to be able to do it. So when you are using questions in your writing, think really carefully about what would be the most effective question to use, where should it go so that people can see it, and make sure that you're using a question mark, that you're actually using question language in order to show the reader that you are expecting a response. When you do those things, you are more likely to get to the outcomes that you want from your messages much faster because you're designing them in a way that makes it easy for the reader to see, understand, and follow through on whatever action you need from them.